For 5 minutes.
Hey, welcome to EchelonOrchid, a special edition for our 2022 predictions. I've got a plethora of people joining for today. Welcoming back, once again, the Ninja Dr. Jason Pittman, RB, the future governor of Virginia, TK Epley, and an extra special guest, my classmate from U of M, especially since we are playing today, Alicia Dillon. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Welcome, everyone. Hope everyone is ready for the new year. Alicia, you might not even get out of Miami before it turns midnight.
What'd you say?
You may not get out of Miami before midnight because the game doesn't start until late, and then, if you're not walking out of that stadium, you're not getting an Uber or Lyft anytime soon.
Right. Yeah. I think we're just going to drive in and set up shop and just tailgate all the way through the new year. That's the plan.
All right. So I don't know if this is on your prediction list or not, Alicia, but going in as of January 1st, 2022, is Michigan in the championship?
Absolutely.
And what's the score? What's the score of today's U of M versus Georgia?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going with 24-14.
24-14, Michigan. Wow. I think it's going to be a blowout one way or the other. Either Georgia blows out U of M or U of M blows out Georgia. I don't think it's going to be a close game. It's going to be, I think, very similar to Ohio State rivalry. So it's either Michigan destroys them or they get destroyed. If they get destroyed, does Jim Harbaugh keep his job?
Absolutely.
Well, I think at this point he's definitely keeping his job. But and why do you think it's going to be a blowout? I think they're pretty evenly matched. I think it might be a good close game.
I can't give you any real any real data to back it up other than I just believe that's what's going to happen. I thought Michigan and Ohio State were pretty evenly matched going in. I was and I felt like Harbaugh was going to lose the game for them, just like they did against Michigan State by making some silly quarterback changes at inopportune times. And then they would get behind, and then I don't think Michigan does well, so to speak, playing from behind. I think they're a front runner. Once they're ahead, then they're just going to pound you. And so if they can get ahead, then it's just going to be, they're just going to continue beating them up. But that's what I think. Ninja, you follow football very closely. What do you think?
I think I'm starting to get uncomfortable being seated this close to you. That's what I think.
Alicia, you got to like the hat.
I'm what?
Can you actually, you might not be able to see the hat because we're, the nice lovely Michigan, because your camera's over there. I don't know if you can actually see.
I don't see the hat.
Yeah. Anyway, all right.
Yeah, we can't see you because we can see.
You can see the ninja in the back of his head. Hey, it's the first time having someone in person and trying to figure all this out. It's hard enough trying to figure it out when it's just by myself.
You got 2 PhDs in technology there. Come on.
Yeah, not this kind of technology. This is, audiovisual, not my area of expertise.
Hey,
Obviously.
for the record, he didn't ask for my help, so I didn't offer it.
Yeah. The kind of audiovisual Jason was used to is holding a camera in Hollywood, but they were typically handheld in the adult film industry.
Yikes.
That's the second time in less than 24 hours he's told that joke to somebody.
It's not a joke. It's true.
It's not.
Facts.
It's not true in the slightest.
All right. So I just have to do a little, the Ninja and I were talking yesterday going up to the distillery. So I've got one additional brag to talk about in terms of predictions. I can't remember what year, but I had said that pretty soon I believe Tesla's going to have their lunch eaten by the big car manufacturers because they're going to surpass them. And Hyundai, through Kia, has now beaten all of Tesla's records when it comes to EVs. And now I think every major car manufacturer is producing EVs. Tesla kind of proved the market, and now I think they are going to continue a downward slope and just not be able to keep up with the major car manufacturers. But I did predict major car manufacturers are going to start to eat their lunch, and it's happening.
Well, Ford's CEO was on Bloomberg, I think, last week, and he said that they are definitely going to be in the number 2 position by the end of next year, if not already. And they're going all in on electric.
They all are still at this point. So, RB, since we're there with you, you've got a handful of predictions here. I don't remember how well your predictions were last year, but they don't necessarily have to happen in 2022. Sometimes we're off by a year or two. I mean, Nostradamus was off by, a couple hundred years in some of his predictions.
Yeah, well, I think this is 2022 is going to be a year of incredible change. Some of the trends we saw are going to continue, but really, I think the big thing that's become apparent to us is that the definition and the way we work and learn are completely disrupted. Learning. If we haven't already realized, we will realize that learning is a lifelong process, and that work in the traditional sense has changed a lot, given the Great Resignation and corporations just scratching their heads. What do we have to do to get people back? And that means there are societal issues that need to be addressed, probably at the government level, maybe in the private sector, relating to, taking care of kids and, giving people more of the ability to be flexible in how they work. So I think that's a huge trend, and that's going to be opportunity also for companies to continue to leverage this change in how we work. But I think the biggest thing we're going to see is that our society is going to be even more polarized, because I see it not as a society of haves and have-nots. That's a result. The real cause of it is a society of people who embrace information, and the other side of society that doesn't embrace information and doesn't leverage information. And that ties into education and science and STEM and all of that. And it's a little scary.
I think it's pretty interesting. The aspect of the information, I think what we're unfortunately already seeing, and I see this quite a bit. People go, well, I'm doing my own research. Okay, how do you know? Because not everyone is trained to understand what research is valid and what's not. And, well, let me tell you, a Medium blog post is not research. That's someone's opinion that has not been backed up by any scientific method. And Jason loves the Medium. It was one of our favorite things with Mathis Life In Tech. We would read something and go, it's a friggin' Medium post. Dude, it's not data.
What about Wikipedia, right? My grad students at Fordham, I had to almost beat them over the head and say, hey, Wikipedia is not an academic source. Well, why not?
I mean, it could lead you potentially to an academic source if you follow, their, so to speak, bibliography at the end. But you got to go to those sources and go, okay, is that one valid?
Here's all you need to know about Wikipedia. The day after, well, actually probably that evening after Aaron Rodgers beat the Chicago Bears for the 25th time in a row, or whatever number it is, Wikipedia said the rightful owner of the Bears was Aaron Rodgers. That's all you need to know about Wikipedia.
Oh, that's funny.
I applaud that sense of humor, but...
So, RB, how do you think that's going to transition with education and learning? Do you think that that's going to have any additional effect on how kids are learning?
Well, I think there's two aspects to learning, right? As a nation, we've always prided ourselves in having a great college and university system, and leaders in the world. But our real problem is at the primary and grammar school level, high school level. That's where the problem is. We have an asymmetrical educational system that's largely a function of your zip code. And that, what it's resulting in is that there are pockets of the country where education is either substandard. I think in the Northeast, here on Long Island, we've got great schools and we're fortunate, but it's not uniformly distributed. And if you don't give kids access to great educational opportunities, society will pay a lot more with the resultant problems, crime and just a more unjust society, where people opportunities are not going to be available to everybody. So it's a challenge, and we don't understand as a society that we should be investing more in education and more in infrastructure and more in STEM. I also sense, and you guys may know a lot more about this, I sense an anti-science sort of wave in the country, and we're a country that put a man on the moon, so we were definitely the leaders in science. What happened?
I don't think it's an anti-science thing at all. When you look at the state of Oregon, where the governor has basically said, hey, we're not going to hold people accountable for math, science, and English effectively, in what I call this not so subtle bigotry of low achievement, right? I don't think people are anti-education. I don't think they're, anti-STEM. What they are is they're fed up with effectively the teachers unions and school and teachers in general saying, hey, you don't get to help pick what your child gets to learn. But then when you talk to a teacher, and I agree with this, there's probably the single largest issue in public education is parental apathy. Right? And you're right. I think your statement, like when you said, hey, the Northeast, I grew up in the Northeast and I grew up at a great public high school. Right? But I think your first statement was more accurate. It's by zip code. Right? If I go in one town in the suburbs of Boston, for example, or the suburb in Virginia Beach, we have great public schools. If I go to the next town over, not so much. Right? And it is by zip code. And I think that's the issue. And so then you start to get in all the other demographic things that people look at. I think as a prediction, Dan, one of the big things we're going to see, and it probably is like a full high school cycle, 4 or 5 years away, you are going to see some psychologically damaged children as a results of the last 2 years of keeping them locked up and making them do things remotely. Right? One of the big challenges and one of the big hurdles you need to get out of high school is to learn how to be a social human being and fit in a group of people and act accordingly. Right? That and the fact that we don't allow, dissent anymore in the country largely, especially when it comes to education. I think those are the parental apathy, the fact that these kids have been locked up for a couple of years. And then now that, hey, when I went to college, it was like question everything. Now it's like, hey, get in line and do what you're supposed to do, or we're going to cancel you. Right? And I think that's going to be the big revolt in the next few years. And I think, the school my daughter goes to, it's a private high school. And so because the public schools kept kids locked up again last year, a lot of parents said, hey, we want our kids to be going to school in person. And the head of guidance was, I overheard, was saying that they're actually contemplating bringing some psychiatrists into school to help the kids that were locked up for a couple of years assimilate back into the social aspect of that. And I think where that's not happening, within 5 years, we're going to see, there's some articles that will say we're going to have a lost generation of kids educationally. Right. And
I've read that.
I think that's I don't even think it's a bold prediction. I think it's something that as a nation, we should be really, kind of focus on what this group of, young folks, young Americans. And I agree with you, it's I think the number one thing a society can do is make sure the next generation is not a collection of dumbasses. Right. And how do we do this? Are we there to teach math, science, English, and reading, and civics? Right.
Civics that's a great point. Civics. Right. We don't teach civics, right? So we don't teach what it means to be a good citizen.
Well, it's not even actually. It even goes. I think at a more base level, we don't teach children anymore how the functions of government work. The 3 branches of government. To basically say a child should be able to say, "Hey, look, for the last 8 to 10 years, Congress has not passed a budget. It's the only thing they're really truly responsible for, and this continuing resolution thing isn't within the bounds of the Constitution."
Correct.
Right? And so people can argue, and you'll hear one argument will say, we've done a great deal in public education to devalue the founders. Because if you devalue the founders, you can devalue the documents.
Sure.
And a lot of that goes, if you don't teach civics, then you're not teaching them how the functions.
It wasn't always like that. I went to school in Queens, New York, and I remember there was a big emphasis on understanding the Constitution, understanding the founding fathers and a lot of American history, especially the first 4 or 5 years.
Right, and I think that's hugely important, right? It's like, look at most of the world's investment bankers. They're either classics majors or they're history majors.
Correct.
Right? They'll have a minor in English or a minor in economics, a minor in math, something where it's quantitative, but they understand the arc of time, right? And those types of things, and they're inquisitive about what happened in the past as an indicator of what's going to happen in the future. And I think Dan has a big. I don't even think it's a bold prediction. I think it's a sad prediction that we're going to have to deal with, kind of the mental health crisis of young people having been locked up for, in some cases now going on 2 or 3 years.
I think it's interesting that because so far, because we don't collaborate on our overall predictions ahead of time, because one of my predictions for this, which is very closely aligned to both yours, I'm not sure where the Ninja's going to go with his, but I think we're going to see a significant amount of parents start to homeschool their kids, because in a lot of states, by going homeschool, the parents are given X amount of credit back in order to put them in other types of programs, whether it be organized sports, music, whatever they want to use that towards. I think we're going to see a significant amount of parents opting to go a homeschool route, and now you're going to wind up potentially these educators. I think you're going to get left with the best of the best that are at those schools, because they're going to leave.
Fragmentation then, and I'm going to be devil's advocate for a second here. When you go to your doctor, do you question, like you assume the doctor has gone to medical school and training and all of that, you look at the credentials and a board licensed doctor? Do you think that a society where at the local level parents get to choose the curriculum results in a more culturally literate society?
Actually, let me back up on that. Just because somebody has there's two folds to this. Just because somebody has a medical license doesn't mean they know anything, right? It means that they are capable of, and I'm not talking about cardiology like special. I'm talking about your primary care person that you go to, right? With regards to nutrition, for liability reasons and insurance purposes, they push the food pyramid, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. And if you ask a doctor how much time they had to spend in medical school between the association of food and how it affects your body, the answer is 0. And
totally agree. They
may feel complete hooly because they wanted to talk about nutrition and make continuing education units. Here's my problem with public education. Because teachers unions throughout the country have steadfastly refused competency testing, like doctors, pilots, lawyers, anybody who can have great effect over you, right, professionally, because they've steadfastly refused standardized testing. Congress and state legislatures around the country, and particularly Congress, has said, well, we've got to do something about this. And so what they've done is they've started testing the students. If you go back to our original statement that parental apathy and all these other outside factors contribute to students not getting what they need, we have no proof of competency from the teachers.
They should test the teachers.
Right. We have no proof of competency from the teachers. And then they've gone the extra step to tie federal, in Virginia in particular, federal funding is tied to the outcome of the exam. So what do the teachers do? They teach the test. And you stop, when you want to talk about lifelong learning, where do you learn to be inquisitive? I learned throughout the thing. So when parents say I don't think a parent wants to walk in and say, teach this book, right? I think we said they want to say, hey, teach civics, right? How you get there is the professional choice. But to say, hey, we should have something of X, Y, and Z, I think that's what and when you tell a parent they have no, like it's being said, you've seen excerpts on television, when you tell a parent they have no legal right or, no expectation that their children, that they should have any input in what their children learn. I don't care whether you agree with it or not. It's not a winning marketing strategy.
No, it's not.
And you're going to have pitchforks in the street.
Yeah, but yeah. So going to my prediction, I'm not saying necessarily I agree or disagree. What I think is it is a natural reaction to when something is going wrong in their minds, they overcompensate, and so they believe by taking full control, they're going to wind up getting a better result. Hey, I applaud, in thinking about this, I applaud any parent wanting to take on that responsibility. They still got to pass, the classes that that the state is putting out. But I think what it should have been is that parents should never have stopped being involved with the education of their children. They should be augmenting if they're not teaching civics. Hey, I've always taught my kids and continue. Hey, let me tell you about the Constitution. Let me tell you about the Declaration of Independence. Here's this. And I give them things. They may not necessarily like it right now because they're kids, but in the future, they get it. And I think it's just an overreaction that they're going to be all involved, and they're not necessarily qualified. Not everyone is capable of being that type of teacher, but they should have been more involved from the beginning and go to the PTA meetings, be involved with the teachers, be involved with those that are making these decisions. Instead, they just went completely hands off. To everyone works, to both mom and dad are working. They rely 100% on the teachers. And I think when you rely 100% on anything, you're never going to wind up getting the result that you originally wanted. So Ninja, where's your first prediction going along?
Well, I want to talk about two things, and then I'll give you mine. I'm going to start backwards, I think.
Okay.
So I probably have a unique perspective on the schooling thing, being somebody in higher education that has taught at private universities and at public universities, but with a young child that we homeschool. And we had decided to homeschool her before COVID hit, and once COVID hit, that was an easy decision for us. Here's part of the problem that I think as a society we have to figure out. To the earlier point, there's deeper issues that are nuanced, and when we're talking about information in particular and learning, it's horribly, horribly complex. The problem we're going to face increasingly, maybe this is kind of a prediction, is when you become a parent, there's no manual that says this is how you parent. There's a lot of it that's derived through experience as you move forward, right? Through mistake, trial and error, experimentation, conversation, what the fuck ever. But there's nothing that says, look, here's some guidelines you can follow if you want to end up with a successful outcome. That's not magic you're going to fucking change when these parents decide to homeschool. Now, I can tell you, and this is anecdotal, it's my experience, but it's my experience. Some of the top students I've ever encountered were all homeschooled. 100%. But that's surface level fact. But deeper facts are their parents were highly educated. More than likely, one of those parents worked in higher education. And so they had overcome this mountain that you face not only as a parent learning how to parent, but now you're a parent learning how to parent that's learning how to be a teacher. Dude, that ain't easy. And so I've seen what happens in these homeschooling groups with my daughter is that the parents, hey, they chose to take it on. I applaud you for the effort that you're putting into this. But at least in the state of North Carolina, the materials you buy to follow the state's curriculum come with what essentially are, and we've all been in these fucking horrible meetings where somebody just reads PowerPoint. That's what you're given. And they really are printed out PowerPoints. They don't give you the PowerPoint file, which I was upset about, but they give you a printed out manual. It's PowerPoints, and I see what most people are doing. They're just reading it. Well, okay, so you're communicating information. That's no guaranteed learning modality. There's no guarantee of outcome against those measures, because like even at 6 and 7, my daughter's taking standardized tests to make sure you're hitting those milestones, which I'm actually a fan of in spirit, not necessarily implementation. So as a society, if we're going to have these conversations and recognize these flaws in our social systems, why don't we actually try to solve it with an idea of, okay, look, if you're going to homeschool, it's not only the curriculum, but here's how you actually effectively teach somebody at these milestones. That segues into, this is going to be really fucking long-winded, so buckle up.
I'm used to it.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's ear abuse. I get it. I hear myself, trust me. Part of the problem with what we've seen, like TK, to your point about the kids being trapped home, is they are absolutely, inarguably, and this is scientific literature supporting this statement, going to be developmentally delayed. That's going to manifest in their cognitive ability. It's going to manifest in their physical ability, and it's sure as shit going to manifest in their, let's say, metasocial ability. And so you're going to produce these young adults going into workforce, trade, university that are 2 to 4 years behind where that generation of people should be in just their biophysiologically and neurological development. And that's going to be catastrophic to society potentially.
Do you believe it's going to affect a particular population more so than another?
Yes. Yeah.
Which?
Okay, well, now I'm going to go to the conversation about the technology, which ties into my first prediction. I think, Ravi, you were talking about the separation between social caste based on technology, right? Those that have technology, that know how to use it, those that have it, that don't know how to use it effectively. And then, right, let's not forget that there's still like 30% of the country that's illiterate. Okay? And so you have these social caste systems in place that nobody wants to talk about. One of the things, this is my predictions, one of the things we're going to see coming in the next, I'm going to say 2 years for sure, it damn well may happen in this next year. There are some very powerful AI systems being released open source by Google, OpenAI, several big companies that are going to be turned into products that have the power to synthesize information for you. And so it's like Siri on steroids. So we've talked about this before several years ago, where one of the things that drives me crazy with these virtual assistants is they can't go consume information on my behalf and bring it back to me and communicate it. Well, now you have that. That's my prediction. That's going to happen.
Before or after Neuralink?
Before. We can talk about Neuralink in a moment. But I'm going to answer your question now. What you're going to see is an ever-widening gap based on just that between the haves and the have-nots, if you want to classify it that way. But then you're actually going to start seeing within the haves substrata start to appear, and then they're going to start separating.
Interesting. All right, Alicia, you're up. What do you got outside of Michigan making it to the championship?
I just wanted to mention one point here. As you guys were talking, I'm just thinking about education, and for me, I think that we need to start thinking outside of the box, because it should be education as an experience. And I think we miss a lot of that, especially in today's world with technology changing so fast. We still live in a pretty small world, right? Like, why are we not doing more trips abroad and having these kids experience life in a way instead of just sitting in a seat in a classroom? And I think that can make a really big difference for our children in the future, because that's really what life's about. It's about having these experiences and building relationships. And what I'm finding, and I apologize for the noise, give me 2 seconds, multitasking. What I'm finding is kids are losing the ability to have relationships and have conversations and relate with one another, because all they're doing is sitting in the classroom or looking at a screen. We're losing touch of that, and it's gonna make or break people, I think. So for me, I think that's a really big deal and something that we should think about. One is the experience and living life, going out, doing field trips, and we've really lost sight of that. And I know with COVID that helped that to not happen. And secondly, just continue to help these young kids build relationships, be able to communicate effectively, be able to manage emotions. And that's just not something that we talk about or deal with in the classroom. And I think it's a big part of business.
I think it's very interesting, because as you were talking about that, I was reminded of the movie Good Will Hunting, when Robin Williams says to the Matt Damon character, hey, you may be able to read about the Sistine Chapel, but you're never going to know what it smells like by reading a book. Those our senses bring back and recall memory much better than just if we read it about something.
Well, and I'll tell you to draw back from my anecdotal experience, of the top students I've ever encountered at an undergrad, not a graduate level, that were homeschooled, all of them traveled extensively as part of their homeschooling. And I don't think homeschooling's for everybody, don't get me wrong, right? But I think one of the distinct advantages it can afford you, if you as a parent are able to capture it and use it, is, to your point, Alicia, we've allowed our educational system to become a monolith that is hyper obsessed with communicating information and then trying to measure the outcome. We've completely, I agree with you, lost track of the fact that the best way to learn is to experience it firsthand. Yeah.
So, Alicia, your point is really interesting, because relating that to, let's say, the engineering curriculum in most schools, the first year, you're taking these courses that are not related to each other, right? And really, I think the first 2 years, 2.5 years, you're taking physics, chemistry, but they're just silos. What if we, starting from day one in engineering school or any technical discipline, we focus more on the teamwork, and you start with a project, and that project relates to chemistry, physics, mechanics, electrical, everything. So what you're doing is then you're gaining experiential level educational outcomes instead of just taking 30 courses that are not related to each other.
Exactly. It's cross-functional, right? Maybe it's a real life project that you get together with the business school and you come up with a new process or program for the healthcare system, or you really have to make it multidimensional.
The real world is about producing a result that is practical, and that the market economy, or even if you're in the government, that some social good will come out of it. And I think that the other big flaw in our system is that we are so focused on the 4-year college degree. Now, I've got one of my college buddies has been in Germany for the last 15 years. And they have a system where if you want to go down a vocational path and they identify you, their vocational schools are excellent. And I think that's the next $1 trillion opportunity, because the internet and technology, except for the elite schools and the top schools, a lot of these middle tier schools that are charging $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year for a college degree that's going to result in nothing but loans, they're going to start converting to become vocational schools. And I think that's the opportunity. I'm in construction. I can tell you that electricians and iron workers, they make corporate salaries, corporate executive salaries. And I can tell you they have a great life. And we diminish that our society by not recognizing the importance of vocational education.
So down here in Virginia Beach, well, in the area, Newport News Shipbuilding, where they build aircraft carriers. And Newport News Shipbuilding is like the Harvard of the welding schools. Right? You have a certificate from them, you can go anywhere on the planet and do it. They're paying there's a void. You have. It
would have been much better if you had said they are the Michigan of shipbuilders, but so it's okay to be. It's still in the top 5.
I'm sorry, is somebody talking right now? I hear words. That's all I hear. I just hear nonsense coming out of somebody's face.
Hey, I'm physically here. If you want, I'll punch him in the face.
I don't want to hurt his feelings. Just shake his hands. You'll feel how soft he is. But you've got welders that are 25 and under, and you have welders that are 50 and older, right? So for 30 years, what happened? We told American kids they were too good to work with their hands. All right? Are you ever going to be a millionaire? Make $1 million a year being a welder? Absolutely not. But I have an acquaintance in Birmingham, Alabama, who's an extremely wealthy dude. If he's not a billionaire, he knows what he needs to be one, right? And he's got 4 kids. 3 of them went to, a top tier Ivy League, those, great universities in the U.S. And the other one said, that's not what I want to do. And he bummed around for a little while, and then he went to the welding program at the Pascagoula shipyard, similar to Newport News. Stayed there for a year. The shipyard pays $22 an hour for you just to learn. Right? You're not paying them, right? You're not incurring debt. They're paying you to learn, and you're under no obligation to stay there when you leave, when you're finished. He stayed at the shipyard for a couple of years, got some experience, made some really good money, came back to Birmingham, bought himself an F-350, tricked it out. And my buddy doesn't think his kids are idiots, but he's like, even my idiot kid makes more than my 3 other Ivy League educated kids put together, right? Because he's making $400 a year driving around town because he's known as a top shelf artisan, right? I mean, even now in the aerospace company that I'm fortunate enough to run, we pay our artisans top shelf. You know why? Because we have to. Because they're great at what they do. They're amazing at what they do, right? And I think nail on the head that lights are always going to have to be on, metal's going to have to be twisted, all of those things. And everybody that does that is going to be a middle-class human being, at least. And you'll get the entrepreneurial people in there that'll go start their own truck, own company, and they'll grow. But, when you're saying, like, Daniel, a nuclear welder makes like $80, $90 an hour now. And they work 60 hours a week, so they got $20 at $120 an hour. Right? And all you have to want to do is work. Right? And show up every day, right? But again, art history degree, incur $100,000 of debt to have to get a master's so you can get a $60,000 a year job. Nobody, as much as I'd like to joke, Dan, nobody talks more eloquently about how to arbitrage debt to your advantage in a career than Dan. Right? And I mean, there's a right way to use money, and or take other people's money and use it, and there's a wrong way to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think largely because we've got this postulate that if you have a college degree, you're everything, and if you don't, you're nothing, right? And you can't aspire, you can't achieve. But I mean, I saw it the other day on Indeed. There was a job offer, or there was a job posting. It paid $16 an hour, and they said master's degree preferred for an entry level job. Like, what do you like? Okay, either get rid of the entry level or raise the price. I mean, raise the offer of what you're going to pay somebody.
See,
I think. Go ahead, Jason.
Sorry, I was going to just say. See, and I think part of that it's another symptom in this broader disease that we're talking about as we circle these conversations, which is that's really representative in my mind of just how far the information that's being communicated during that education has been devalued. And it's been devalued to that point because it lacks the experience behind it to implement it and articulate it and apply it to things in the world. And so, I'm sitting here listening to all of us talk, including myself, and there's one emergent theme, like as a code or a label that I could put on the answer to this, and that's apprenticeship. Yep. And that extends down to the parenting too. And that's why I think this idea of taking each other and our kids out into the world to experience things as a mode of learning. Well, my kid is an apprentice to me as an adult, as a human being. You're a human apprentice. And what we're doing is we're trying to create a simulation that's real enough that you can actually learn how to deal with these things. And I think that answer for me works at all these different levels.
You know what the average GPA of a billionaire is? And it's not saying they finished college. It's just of the college work they have done. You know what the average GPA of a billionaire is?
2.7.
No, 2.9.
2.9.
Right? It's the old thing. A students work for B students, C students manage the companies, and D students endow the buildings.
Yep.
Right? Both my kids, I'm like, I don't want you to be a 4.0. Right? Because I want you to go experience life. My son is 23. He's graduated college already. He's extensively traveled. It started when he was 10 or 11 years old. We got him a young ambassador program, and he went to England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. Then, because he went to Catholic school, they do a trip between junior and senior year. And because it's Catholic, you got to go and see the Pope first. And then they went all through Europe. They went to a concentration camp, which again, that's an experience. Like once you understand what humans can do to other humans, it changes how you look at the world, right? And then probably one of my proudest moments was when he came home from school a few years ago. I was like, hey, don't do something next Tuesday. We're going to, Christmas stuff with friends and stuff like that. He goes, I'm not going to be here. I'm like, where are you going to be? He goes, me and the buddies planned a trip and we're going to Iceland. Because they all just decided, hey, we want to go see what Iceland's all about. And they booked it. They paid for it themselves. They saved their money and they got on a plane and did it. That's for me is like, how did we get to the moon? How are we going to get to Mars? It's by people that are inquisitive. Like we walked out of the cave. We walked over the hill. We created fire. We knew it burned us. And then we're on this trajectory of exploration that frankly, since 1975 was the last time we landed on the moon, plus or minus, that we just said, forget it. Don't worry about it. And now we can't seem to get out of low Earth orbit. Right? And I think that's a metaphor for like us as humans. Like we did these great things, and then we retracted and said, oh man, let's get back and be fearful.
Well, this is what I like to tell my junior employees, even kids. What do you think you could imagine if you had unlimited resources?
Right, it's the Satchel Paige thing. Yeah. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you was?
Yeah. Nice. All right, Alicia, I'll give you get 2 in a row here. Since you were off camera for so long doing other things.
Sorry. I would just say really short-term predictions. I think there's going to be a lot of volatility, and I'm going to move this more to the finance side of the house because that's what I do. I think there's going to be a lot of volatility in the market. I do think with the Feds changing their monetary policy, they're raising the interest rates. It's definitely coming. They're cutting back on all the stimulus. I think that what you're going to see is just still I think there's a lot of commerce happening. I think there's still a high demand for commodities. And I think you're going to continue to see that. I think there's just going to be pockets where much more volatility, and really overall, this year is just going to be 2022, I think is going to be a little scary as a finance person, as an investor. But I still have faith. I still have a positive outlook. I do think as the Pfizers and the Modernas of the world continue their research and they continue to come out with more and more even proactive COVID and Omicron variant. They have a pill now that Pfizer just approved this. This was like a week ago, that you can take this as a proactive supplement for COVID. I think that as much fear as we've had, I think people are kind of getting over it, and they're like, okay, we can live with this thing. We can deal with this. We can figure it out. So that gives me hope that the economy isn't going to come crashing down. I do have a little bit of concern about inflation. I think it's definitely going to continue to rise. I do know wages are on the rise as well, which is great, but I think that's only pushing up the inflation. And so hopefully we can make that match. I hope we can make sure that our wages are matching up with that inflation, so that it's not going to impact the economy with a recession.
So interesting in that. So when you, not that this show is about giving any type of financial advice, and you should go seek a professional to help you with that. So at what point are you going to short all these pharmaceutical companies?
That's a good question, actually. I don't know. I would say that's a really good question. I haven't thought of the short on the pharmaceuticals, but what I have thought about is,
because I believe, I mean, I in this particular case with the pharmaceuticals, because governments around the world are pre-purchasing these particular pharmaceuticals, and so we have an overinflated income statement because they were able to recognize all this revenue quite a bit. Their stocks went way up, which they haven't had this type of profit before, so they're not going to be able to keep up with that demand unless they unless they invent new diseases. But I don't think that's going to continue to occur. I think at a certain point in time, it'll be time to short them and make a lot of money. I wonder when Warren Buffett's going to do it.
I definitely think it will happen. I cannot predict when. What I do know also is that we're Americans and we're kind of selfish. And I have been doing a lot of research on this, just on the vaccine and the distribution. And we are throwing away the vaccine because we're hoarding it, frankly, in the United States. And there's countries around the globe that are desperate for it, and we are not distributing it. So it's a real problem. The demand is there globally. It's just we're not figuring out that distribution and getting it and shipping it out to where it needs to go. And I think that's because these other countries aren't willing to pay the same price that Americans are, which is unfortunate, right? So I do foresee that the demand globally will continue at least through 2025, probably. And whether or not we figure out that distribution, the demand is not going away. It's just, what is that like true up on price going to be? Because right now, clearly it's much higher than I think reality would have it. So,
do you see the housing market being corrected next year?
Yeah, I'm seeing, I don't think it's going to be a full correction. I do see the market starting to soften. Even here, I just bought a condo in Miami Beach. And even while I was buying, I could see that before, the first part of like October, November, it was like as soon as the condos were going on the market, they were selling like within a few days. And my condo that I bought, it was on the market for 28 days. So that goes to show that there is some softening of the market. Where I think it's going to continue to stay high is the demand is still so high for housing. Like you should see the new projects that are happening even in Florida. So I think there's going to be these pockets of areas where the prices will not decline, but I'm seeing a softening in the market across the board. So I do think there's going to be a slight correction. I don't I don't think it's going to be what others have predicted, where it's going to be this total true up. It's going to be like, the 2008 bubble burst. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the demand is so high, the supply is so low. You can't get the construction materials with the supply chain issues. I do not see this like massive popping of a bubble. I think the prices will continue to stay high.
I think the inconsistency with being able to get the raw goods to build a house, normally, you start seeing rising inflation, the housing market slows down quite a bit because money gets more expensive. I think, it actually might, the balance will be less normal. I think because there's still such a high demand and people have to wait just because, a sheet of plywood, $60, right? Whatever it costs, it's just some insane amount of money now.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with that. It's just, I don't think it's going to, because you've got the demand and the lack of raw goods, I think it'll keep the bottom of that a little bit higher than normal.
Yeah, I agree with that. So in terms of the market softening, it is happening. I think most of the people that were moving and transient, they have kind of settled over the last year. And now with people being asked to come back into the office, you're seeing a lot of that slow down. So a lot less travel and people moving to new cities. I think a lot of that happened in 2021. So it's starting to slow down. The very top end of the market is softening, but it will continue to remain solid for that very point, TK, that you just made. The demand is still high. The supply chain is insane. And frankly, I mean, even with this inflation, to your point, you would think, okay, with this inflation, things are going to start slowing down. They're just not. It's like unprecedented what we're seeing in these markets. And so that's where I think that, again, back to my point, the volatility is just going to be, we're going to see swings because we've never seen this before. Like anything that you could typically predict with the inflation rising and the Fed's tightening their monetary policy, it's like people don't care. Look at the market.
Well, and I think in fairness, so I remember in 2003 when I bought a condo, I thought I got a great interest rate. It was 4.7%. It's more than a generation now that we have experienced very low interest rates. So you've got a generation of young people thinking that 2 and 3% mortgage interest is normal. I'd like to, when the interest rates hit 5 and 6 and 7%, where your $2,000 mortgage is now $6,000, what does that do to the market?
Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing is ahead of, I think they've been holding off on raising interest rates and everything, but the simple fact is we've never seen the raw level of QE that in history that you've seen in the last 16, 18, certainly in the last year, but leading up to that, right? And that's got to have, we don't know what that negative impact is going to be as far as inflation goes and everything, right? I mean, to your point, Robbie, I remember in the late 80s, a buddy of mine bought a house and he was paying 12.5%. And he thought he got a good deal because 3 years before that it was 19%.
I remember that. I remember early 80s paying, my dad was paying 14% on his mortgage.
So TK, back when you bought your first house in the late 1800s, what was the interest rate then?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, in the late 1800s when you bought that first house, what was the interest rate?
I'm sorry, there's words, I don't know. But if you look at like when Carter left office, it was like 19% inflation, 22% interest rate to buy a house.
Stagflation.
Right, and so, how do we get control of that, right? I mean, and, to kind of see a sidebar was if you look at, and actually it dovetails into the problems we have today, right? Both Reagan and Tip O'Neill figured, hey, if we don't get a handle on this economy thing, neither of us are going to be in office anymore, right? And so they worked together and they got a handle on it, and we got it back on a normal glide slope. And then when the same thing was happening again in the 90s, Clinton and, the Unusual Bedfellows Club, Clinton and Newt Gingrich said, hey, we got to work together. We're not going to think. Well, what's our single largest problem in America today?
Right. We don't see that anymore.
Nobody can talk to each other.
No.
Right. And so now we let government bureaucrats drive the bus in the form of the Fed or, the FDA, the CDC. And like, there's no, pick a government agency. Those are the ones that are in the news every day. But pick a government agency and the bureaucrats are driving the train, not the constitutionally appointed officers that we elected they're not as proactive. And it's not about it's more about the win, right? And
The soundbite. It's all about the soundbite.
what's that? Yeah. Well, yeah. In order to get the win, you got to have the right soundbite, right? That we did this, and a bipartisan bill in the 1980s was when both sides came together. Now, if one Republican jumps over to the Democrat,
That's called bipartisan
bill, or vice versa, right?
Yeah. All right, Ninja, what do you got?
I was just thinking, is my next prediction Bitcoin surpasses 100K? Or I've been thinking a lot about all the cargo ships sitting off harbors, and sometimes I wonder why they're not being pilfered more. The goods are just sitting there. Why isn't there let's say?
Is this the reason why you really wanted to be the president of the pirate party in North Carolina?
That is correct, because I wanted literal pirate ships. I really just want a pet monkey that sits on my shoulder with a patch on his eye. But anyway, yeah, no, I think.
But are you saying that you think that maybe some of these ships are going to, hey, there's pirates off the coast of South Africa, right? So,
well, what stops one of the captains from just thinking to myself, "Fuck this! I'm sitting on a literal gold mine." I mean, and what I'm going to go with Bitcoin surpasses 100K by the end of 2022. But I want to continue this shipping conversation real quick.
100K by 2022.
By the end of 2022.
Let's see what it's at right now.
It should be at 47, 46 right now.
Let's see.
Anyway, what surprises me is the supply chain issue is so pervasive across every vertical. I think it really shows just how fragile our modern logistics and supply chain management is. Because look, you can pick on graphics processing units, GPUs, real easy.
47.
So it's up today. Okay. NVIDIA's getting ready to release the next generation of cards. I don't know why, because you're not going to be able to buy them. Because you can't buy 2 generations ago. And if you can, they're 2-3x in markup. But I was looking at a new bike, because I like to race, as some of you may know. Dude, the estimated shipping date was April of 2023. And it's not necessarily the carbon fiber for the frame, it's the metal that goes into crafting the gear and the group sets. That's the holdup. Which creates another problem, because if I break a part right now, I can't get a replacement part to maintenance it. That's not a prediction, that was just kind of
a statement.
Ranting from
Try taking Chinese parts that go in UAVs and making those parts non-Chinese right now.
Right.
And try to find all the surge. Parts that we were paying $20 a piece for, they're now asking $150 to $180.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the point of really just-in-time inventory and this real short-term, quarter-by-quarter profiteering that we've been doing to just make our shareholders happier. So forgot the long-term play, right? We have to get an inventory so our margins are high. I mean, it's all of this thinking of just quarter-by-quarter, short-term thinking, and we've lost it. We've lost it as a country, as a company, as a for-profit entity. We're just trying to get quarter by quarter to make sure that our stock prices don't blow up.
Right.
And I think that's really, really assisted this crisis that we're in of nobody has inventory sitting around on purpose.
Right.
And we forgot the scenario long-term play here. And I think people are starting to figure that out.
But isn't that a societal problem? We are a society of instant gratification, and we pay, and this has been going on for 40 years. We reward our CEOs based on their quarterly stock performance, and They've lost the ability to think in a more infinite way. In long distance, long range thinking is out the door.
Well, and I also think in the last year, some of that's been taken out of their hands by their ability to, even if they want to contemplate a year ahead, right? Depending on what industry you're in, right? If they want to, what's my roadmap and how am I getting there? That's been taken out of their hands by supply chain alone.
Right.
So
what's the single largest impediment right now? Trucking. right? You can't get people to drive trucks. What's the single large, and again, go listen to the radio all day long. If you're driving around, listen to the radio. Every other commercial is going to be somebody wanting to say, hey, well, we're going to pay drivers more than they've ever been paid before. You can't get people to drive trucks. You know why? They can't pass the drug test. Again, you're talking about another industry where under current norms, they're sending a first-year driver to make 80, 90 grand a year. All right, but somebody can't lay off the puff, puff, pass long enough to go out and get that job. Same with longshoremen and, you know, all these other, you know, work with your hands things that pay middle-class wages, right? And, you know, Jason, to answer your question about piracy, if somebody wants to get up and get their giddy up going and move a ship, it will, especially like Port of Long Beach.
Yeah.
U.S. Navy will have something to say about that. And same in Norfolk. But if, you know, I want to see the evening news after somebody tries to pull a small boat up and board a vessel inside U.S. territorial waters.
Yeah, like I don't think it's going to end well for him. And what you just said is exactly what I was thinking in my head. Probably would be the result. I'm just kind of surprised nobody's fucking tried it yet.
Yeah, I'm you know, people will try anything, right? I mean,
right.
You know, I mean, it's even if it's just, hey, I'm gonna get in trouble, but I'm gonna have a great story, right? It's D.B. Cooper portion of life.
Yeah.
So, Alicia, did you just turn it off for a moment? Because I had a question about your last comment there.
Yeah.
So, as CFO, what's your inventory management strategy? You going with LISH, FISH, LIFO, FIFO? What's the what's your recommendation?
So one, I work for an organization that doesn't have any inventory, so I don't have any real world experience to offer you on that in current state. I can give you some theory if you'd like.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. So mine is I prefer LIFO, actually. Last in, first out. I think with the way things are changing so quickly, I think just getting out your old inventory and not keeping that, because honestly, it's becoming obsolete so quickly now. LIFO, for me personally, on a theoretical level, makes a lot of sense. And I do think really, really doing this scenario planning where you're looking at the demand and not just weekly or monthly or quarterly, but really starting to figure out and be on the cutting edge of what the demand is going to be and what the wants and needs are of your market segments. Because it's just changing so quickly nowadays, and it's hard, right? You don't want to stock up on something on a blue t-shirt when everyone really, really wants the pink t-shirt, and then you have all of this obsolete inventory. So I prefer LIFO.
You can always sell the blue t-shirts to the MDen. They'll make use of them.
That's what I'm saying. But yeah, like just being creative and thinking through those scenarios. and you know, I think there's people that get paid a lot of money to do that. Now with AI, I think it makes it a lot easier as well. But maybe coming up with more creative inventory and products that can be multifunctional, or maybe it's a tie-dye t-shirt instead of a blue or a pink one, you know? And I just think being more creative in how we're using our products and being able to shift it or use it for multi-purpose versus just one functional thing. And I know that's not relevant for every single company. Some companies are very precise and this is what they do, and they make it with quality and don't change anything. So I would say...
So do you think most of these companies that were using first in, first out?
I'm sorry?
With the particular supply chain issues that we have, were they basically using first in, first out because of the just-in-time delivery? And if they actually, in a way, hoarded more of their resources that are the raw materials in order to make product, we wouldn't be having this issue? Or what's...
Yeah, of course. And frankly, some just use it as an accounting trick, right? First in, first out. And so you have your older, less costly inventory on hand. And so it looks better on your balance sheet, right? We're getting back to that quarterly bottom line. So people do a lot of different things for a lot of different reasons. And I completely understand it from a financial perspective. I just think now going through the supply chain issue and really trying to be more strategic in the long term and not just thinking about the bottom line, this is where you need to be thoughtful. But yeah, people absolutely all day, they do first in, first out, and it makes a lot of sense for them.
Well, see, and if I can interject real quick, because I've been thinking about this, I think part of what we're seeing in the supply chain issues actually is more aligned to. I just participated in a study, and part of that study's conclusion was, on average, it takes the U.S. federal government around 12 to 1,500 days to implement a technology as a project. And yet the rate of change for the technology is about 2.5 months. Mm-hmm. And so there's this miss or de-alignment between the rate of change and the length of time for a project. And if you know anything about systems, when you have two oscillators that aren't in sync and they get destabilized, usually what happens is the fucking thing blows up to some degree. And so if there's not some kind of correction across these complex social systems, my concern over the next year and 2 years is that this destabilization that we're seeing, for instance, in supply chain is going to cascade down through other systems. And that would be disastrous. Let alone if we have like one big solar flare.
Yeah, well, I love that you're using the federal government as your example here. I mean, it's very, very difficult to use the federal government as the prime example. But to your point, it's true. And I don't think that's changing anytime soon because of how the federal government has set up their budgets. And it's use it or lose it. And I know personally, actually, when I lived in Virginia Beach, I know personally people that worked in the shipyard, and they literally didn't have anything to do, but they just showed up every single day and just sat there and just made a lot of money. They just made a lot of money sitting there, and it was just because it's a systematic issue with how. For me, it's going to continue to be a problem until the government starts looking at their systems and how their operations are working and make a change. So that's not going to change. And I think we're seeing this dichotomy starting to happen, right? Where more and more we're getting further and further apart, where technology is so fast and it's so quick, and all of these for-profit enterprises do things so rapidly and quickly and efficiently and well, but we still have the slow-moving train with the federal government. Like nothing's really happening in that space, and I think we need that. We need that to happen.
Well, I wonder, for the group's consideration, if part of the answer to a lot of what we've pointed out as error or root issue across all these different systems, social systems, education, business, so forth and so on, is maybe this is the start of a correction insofar as the answer can no longer be short-term globalization. It's long-term localization. And that, for me, extends from government down to raising kids.
Well, when you take a look, I think, at a lot of the resources that we have in the United States, to what Alicia was referring to earlier, we hoard a lot of it and then buy it foreign. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Whether it be oil, whether it be metal, whether it be natural gas. We don't tend to use what we currently have. We want to use up someone else's resources. And, now we're kind of at the problem that we're in. So, there's.
I got a quick shout out here. Ryan's here, who's also a CFO and very knowledgeable. Can you quickly just give us your 2022 predictions?
Of what?
Of what the market? What do you think is going to happen in 2022?
Market up 10%.
Okay, and why do you think that?
Not going to be like last 3 years, but there's still a lot of room to go.
Wait, before I can determine whether or not Ryan's even capable of making a prediction right now, because it is a little bit past 1:00. Ryan, when did you start drinking this morning?
I actually have not had a drink yet today, so you can take that.
Whoa! Ryan's also a U of M, class of 2020 grad, so. But you have to ask him that, because most of the times he didn't go to sleep the night before. He just stayed out all night long on from Friday to Saturday. So you don't really know what you're getting. So you got to ask the valid question. All right,
The valid question.
We're on the up and up today, but in a few hours, maybe.
Yes, hopefully not.
I got another prediction for you.
Yeah, what do you got?
My prediction is I'm fucking hungry and we're going to go to lunch soon, and now I'm thirsty also.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close. We're past that hour. We got time for one more. So, RB, what do you got?
Okay, something that's going to be a little bit sort of shattering in a way. I think that the real opportunity in our economy, in our great economy, is the medical infrastructure, the entire medical systems that we've built on curing diseases and finding medicines for new diseases that we invent. And what we're not tackling, and this is the $1 trillion opportunity, is we're not tackling actual preventive health care. What we're doing is we're saying, well, if you get sick, take this medicine, or it's okay, you can eat and drink whatever you want, but the medical establishment will save you, even if it means that it will consume 30% of our GDP at some point. We're already at 18%, and that's not sustainable. So the future, and here's a book that I'm going to plug a little bit because it's been the most important book I've read in 2021, Lifespan by David Sinclair. It is an eye-opener.
Great book.
He pretty much trashes the medical community, and he's been ostracized a lot because he said our focus is always on curing diseases instead of attacking a more healthier approach.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah, nice. All right, TK, what's your last prediction for today?
Along the lines of Robbie, there's a more than significant segment of the population that is tired of feeling pushed around by the whole COVID thing, right? And to go back to it, and Dan, you and I have talked about this before. If we just spent 1/10 the effort talking about healthy lifestyle and really looking at the demographics of who is most vulnerable and why, and rather than making it the panic porn thing, I think that we're getting to a point where people have had enough. They don't want to hear about it anymore. And that's on the left and the right, whether even public people like Bill Maher. But I think that and the fact that people are going to start campaigning this year for the 2022 elections hard, right? And the reaction of lawmakers to COVID, particularly with regards to how they held the CDC and all the other federal agencies that are basically chartered with trying to be good stewards of big pharma and what they're doing to us, for us, however you want to look at it. I think that we're really going to see this incremental pushing, how far can people be pushed? And I think that everybody who's been pushing is going to realize we've been pushed far enough, and they're going to naturally back off, right? And I think from there, because I will tell you that vaccine passports and locking down cities and telling people that you can't go to a baseball game is not going to work in the United States of America. Right. That's going to, and it's not. When I say that's going to be the revolt, I don't mean people are going to have pitchforks in the streets. I mean people are just going to be, I am not going to comply. Right? I think that's going to be rough around April, May, right? And then, leading up to the midterm elections is going to be chaos in the media on both sides of that, because there's the battle for your soul, right? That's the like a big Jungian thing. It's just battle for your soul, right? And everybody wants to get their way. I think it's going to be highly interesting. It's like get your popcorn time stuff, but we're going to hear some wild statements come out of would-be politicians' mouths between now and 2022. And I think that is the people that aren't going to be closely focused or pay attention to it because they don't think it affects them. That's really going to be they're the people that are going to be out of the middle of the room, right? And because frankly, because we've been locked up, most people have been getting all their news on Twitter and stuff like that, right? And just like Medium is not science, social media is not news, right? And the book that Robbie brought up, I encourage everybody to read it. It's a great book.
Nice. All right, so my last two predictions will be very quick. One, I'll be less than 180 pounds because I'm already at 187, so I will definitely be below 180. And I believe at the distillery we will reach $30,000 in revenue. That's my predictions for that. I think that's still pretty aggressive, even though my consultant says we should way surpass that. I think 30,000 is a good first year goal for our revenue. But
I'm rooting for 60, Dan.
Would love it, but 30,000 I think is pretty reasonable.
You undervalue your progress.
Yeah, so got to sell the first bottle first. All right, my friends, thank you so much for joining. Alicia, you need to come on a little bit more often. and stop being reclusive down there in Florida. I know they got internet down there, so, got to get you on a little bit more often.
Yes. It was fabulous seeing you all. What a great discussion. Some brilliant minds here. We need to do this more often for sure.
Awesome. Everyone have a safe, happy new year, and go blue.
Have a great New Year.
Go Blue.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers, everybody.